Welcome to The Long Way Round. Thank you to Kiala Kelly, Liz Hill, and Tiokasin Goshorse for First Voices Radio. Always an important voice for our world to understand the perspective of Indigenous peoples everywhere. Yeah, my name's Malcolm Byrne. You're listening to The Long Way Round. This is Radio Kingston, WKNY. And tonight my very special guest is Rabbi Dovid Feldman. Dovid Feldman is a spokesman for Naturai Karta International, an organization founded in the 1930s in Jerusalem to protect the Jewish community from the new Zionist movement. Over the past few decades, NKI has been actively publicizing the voice of many Jewish communities around the world against the Zionist ideology, the Zionist state, and its crimes committed against the Palestinian people. They explain to the world the distinction between Judaism and Zionism, that the relatively new Zionist movement is a rebellion against God, and that it does not represent the Holy Torah, nor the entire Jewish people. Rabbi Feldman and his colleagues frequently appear at public demonstrations, university lectures, and pro-Palestinian conferences, as well as regularly giving television and radio interviews. They often fly to countries around the world, including many Arab countries, to express their sympathy with the suffering and support of the Palestinian people. They meet with political and religious leaders and have been very successful in building bridges between the Jewish and Arab communities. Among their numerous trips, Rabbi Feldman and his colleagues have visited the besieged Gaza Strip multiple times, where they've delivered truckloads of medical aid, including an ambulance, purchased with donations they have collected. They were warmly received there, as in all Arab countries. Welcome, shalom, to the show, Rabbi Dovid Feldman. So grateful to have you, and honored, of course.
Thank you. It's my honor.
So I am very familiar with you because I've seen you many times on the internet, showing up at various, usually pro-Palestinian gatherings. And the first time I saw you, I was almost shocked. I was surprised, to be honest. And then I listened to you speak, and I thought, okay, there's something I don't know that's being explained to me for the very first time that I don't even understand. And I'd like you to sort of, for the listeners, give me just a bit of background for yourself and also your movement and why you think now is particularly crucial time.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And it's exactly that point that you say, that you were shocked the first time you saw us. That's basically the reason why we do and why we are so involved in all these activities, because we realize that people are unaware to the reality of Judaism. And unfortunately, it's our religion, the Jewish religion, and our people, the Jewish people, who are totally misrepresented by today's movement of Zionism, today's state of Israel, which on purpose, this Zionist movement is doing everything they can to give this image as if all Jews support their movement and as if all Jews support all their crimes against the Palestinian people, and if the Jewish religion condones all what the state of Israel does. And unfortunately, the masses of people follow this mainstream media, Zionist propaganda, and people have very limited ability to know anything better than that. And now it's way better than decades ago. You know, if you go back like 30 years ago, nobody didn't know anything other than what mainstream media will tell them. Today, with alternative media, with shows like yours and other honest people who are helping the general public to be exposed to some basic truth, basic facts, which unfortunately is being hidden. Without this information, unfortunately, people are totally misled. Now, to explain a little bit more, first and foremost, we have to understand what we're dealing about. We're dealing about the state of Israel, which is not only committing crimes against Palestinian people, which at least today people are very aware, And people sometimes are so puzzled, how come, people of a religion, people who are known to be the people of God, committing all these crimes? It doesn't make really sense. But in order to understand all of this, we have to first and foremost understand there's a great difference between Judaism and Zionism. And this basically explains the overall picture, what we are seeing. Judaism is a religion, and a religion only. This is a religion of 3,000 years. Nothing about nationalism. There is no condition in Judaism that we have to have a nationalism in order to be Jewish, in order to be loyal to God, in order to follow the Jewish religion. Yes, once upon a time when we had a Holy Land, there were special commandments in regards to the Holy Land. If we don't have a land, then those commandments no longer apply to us. But again, it's not a condition. In other words, I myself, I happen to be an American Jew. I'm Jewish by the religion I follow, and I'm American by nationality. And there is no contradiction there. Why? Because the religion is nothing about nationalism. But when you see this movement of Zionism, is something totally different. It's basically attempting to transform Judaism from a religion into a nationalism. God forbid you no longer have to follow God and his religion. You just have to support this national movement of Zionism. Now, this is not only a violation of Judaism. This is an uprooting of the very essence of Judaism. And sadly, you find today masses, unfortunately, embarrassingly enough, I say, it's the majority of Jewish people who no longer follow God and his religion and identify with the movement of Zionism. In other words, how they see their Jewish identity is only about nationalism. And just to explain a bit more, I'll tell you a little story I had. I was once on a plane from London to New York. I come into the plane. There's a gentleman sitting at the window seat. I sit down in the aisle seat. There's an empty seat between us. I say hello, and I fall asleep. Once I wake up, I see the Haaretz newspaper on the empty seat between us. And obviously, I understand that the person next to me is a Zionist. And, we go into a very nice, polite, respectful discussion, which is fine. I try to explain my views about Israel, and then he tries to explain his views. And then we come to a point where that Zionist gentleman says, regardless whether you are right or wrong, I would never give it up. I risked my life in the army. I would never give it up. Now listen to what I told him. I said to him like this: I totally understand where you come from. And here's a very, very important point. And I told him what I said before. All what makes me Jewish is my religion, regardless of my nationality. If I don't have a Jewish nationality, nothing is missing from my Judaism. Versus other people that for one reason or another don't follow the religion of Judaism. And again, we're not the people to judge the individual, but for one reason or another, they don't follow Judaism. Now, all that defines them Jewish is only this nationalism. Now, what happens when this nationalism comes to a point where it comes under question mark? If something is wrong with that nationalism, and either the world stands up and says, something is wrong, or the individual wakes up and see that something doesn't make sense. This is not Judaism. This doesn't make sense. This is not, this is not humane. Then what happens is it's not only that this national movement comes under a question mark. Unfortunately, it's his Judaism that comes under question mark. And this is something that nobody can tolerate because no one wants to give up their Jewish identity. But what I explained to that gentleman is that this tragedy that your Judaism comes under question mark doesn't start today with our conversation when we are raising some critics against the state of Israel. This calamity started when Zionism first began, when they first attempted to transform Judaism from a religion into a nationalism. That's the point when our religion was so badly attacked and destroyed to a certain point. And that's considered to Jewish people as a true tragedy. In addition to all what the movement of Zionism is doing to others, it is truly harmful and uprooting the very basics of Judaism. Now, this is even before going into details. This is just overall the actual philosophy, the approach of that Zionism took. It's also, different. When the movement of Zionism came about, it took a different angle than many other movements amongst Jewish people that left Judaism. Because before Zionism, when one would leave Judaism, well, there was a reform movement also in the same way. But if we go back before reform, if an individual or a group will choose to drop Judaism, then simply they leave Judaism and they take any other approach. But what Zionism did is upholding, keeping the name Judaism and transforming it into something else. Now, in addition to what they are going in the wrong direction according to Judaism, they are basically harming that Judaism that they misrepresent. This is just very, very basic, a very basic uprooting of our religion. But in addition to that, it's basically a movement which is uprooting each and every rule of Judaism, generally speaking. But when we come to the story of Palestine, it's committing so many crimes which people see as crimes in international law, but we say as religious people, all what is being done to Palestine is not only a violation of international law, it's a violation of Jewish law. Killing, stealing, oppressing an entire people happens to be that same people that were kind to us for hundreds of years, respectful to us, hosted us, and protected us. This is unfair, and this is not Jewish. I would like to add, in addition to all these crimes being done to Palestine, it happens to be that the philosophy of Zionism, the philosophy of building a sovereign homeland for the Jews, those Jews in exile, those Jews who were suffering for so long, those Jews who went through the horrors of the Holocaust, all of this is true history. Now delivering to these Jewish people this beautiful, brilliant idea of having a solution to the Jewish problem. It's a very nice, beautiful idea, but it happens to be in total contrast of basics of Judaism. And this is very important to understand in order to realize and understand that how far away this is from Judaism and how much this does not represent Judaism. Now, there's a very basic concept in Judaism, happens to be one of the basics of Jewish belief, is the concept of exile. Yes, there is a concept being used always in Zionist propaganda, the promised land. God promised the land for the Jewish people, which is a true concept. It's a true concept, but we call this Zionist propaganda. And why do we say propaganda if it's true? Because if you take truth and you present it in the wrong way, if you show only one side of the coin and you don't show the other side of the coin, then you are using this in a false way. You can use sometimes some true concepts and it's presenting in a way where you're just presenting falsehood. And here is the example. Yes, there is a concept of the promised land. God has promised the Holy Land for the Jewish people. But, and this is the but that nobody speaks about, and Zionist propaganda will never tell you this. The land was given for the Jewish people on condition. And there's 2 verses in Leviticus which says, the land should not reject you because you defile it. In other words, if you don't keep the land in the level of holiness God requires of you, you would be expelled from the land. There is so many verses speaking about Jewish exile. There is so many verses in the books of the prophets where God warned the Jewish people through the prophets, unless you repent, you would be exiled from the land. Unfortunately, this is what happened several hundred years after the Jewish people were brought into the land. And by the way, according to Judaism, the Jewish people came into the Holy Land not by their physical might, but by the hand of God. Several hundred years later, Jewish people were exiled from the land. At the time, it happened by the hands of the Romans that destroyed the temple and drove the Jewish people into exile. But according to basics of Judaism, this was a divine decree, which Jewish people are required to accept it. This decree of exile, whether it is comfortable or it isn't. And the majority of times, it was not comfortable. Recently, now in many countries where we live, we appreciate our leadership. We have a freedom of religion, which is highly appreciated, and we thank our governments for that. Happens to be that Muslim countries were part of these examples, where Muslim countries were so hospitable for the Jewish people, and this is something that we should remember. But again, coming back to the point that Jewish people are required to accept the decree of exile and not fight against it, not fight the decree of God. We are forbidden to fight, to wage wars against any nation. We are required to be loyal citizens in whichever country we reside, regardless whether the government is kind to us or it isn't. We are required to live in peace with our neighbors. Now, all of this was accepted by all Jews throughout all generations, without any exception for the past 2,000 years. There was no question about this until this new philosophy of Zionism came up with a total different approach. Not only different, it's an approach in the contrast of what it was until then. And this is a very important point. The philosophy of Zionism was not invented by some Jewish scholars who followed Judaism and had some kind of a new approach in line with Judaism. Even if it would have been that, we would question those people coming up with a new philosophy which was unacceptable for thousands of years. But it happens to be way worse than that. We had people, Theodor Herzl and his friends, for over 100 years ago,
yes,
in the 1800s, which was openly not only secular, but heretic. They hated God and they hated the Jewish religion. They turned their back to the tradition of their own grandparents. And they and only they came up with this philosophy, which is so contrary to all before that. Now, if one really realizes what's going on, there is no way that you can make a mistake and think that this is representing Judaism. This is a new movement, which, it's an XYZ movement. You can call it whatever you like. It's the choice of the individual to follow it or not to follow it. But in any case, you cannot call this Judaism. This is in no way the continuation of generations of Judaism. Now, I always say there is nothing Jewish about the movement of Zionism other than the fact that some people from Jewish descent invented it and some people from the Jewish communities support it. But it's still in no way does it make it Jewish, religious, or righteous. And in the same time, we have to realize that despite the fact that mainstream media will never tell you this, and despite the fact that people see what we have to say and they get shocked, but it happens to be that masses of Jewish people worldwide disagree with Zionism. Some of them will raise their opposition in public, and you can imagine how difficult that might be. Intimidation, Zionist intimidation from day one is terrible and ridiculous, as so many people are aware about this anti-Semitism accusation. If you dare to speak up against Israel, then you're automatically anti-Semitic, which doesn't make any sense. But this is at least a propaganda tool. But the same kind of approach, they attack Jewish people if they dare to speak up. But you can imagine, if you see so many people out in public, you can imagine how many more people are behind them, supporting them, and sharing this anti-Zionism. I'm in the United States of America. We have a very strong community in New York and in many other states. Europe, this strong community in Europe against Zionism. Canada, and it happens to be in occupied Palestine, in Jerusalem, and in other cities in the Holy Land. We have very strong communities who are very outspoken. You just have to scratch the surface, especially today with alternative media. If you really try to look for it, you will find it, and you will be fascinated by how strong people still hold on to traditional Judaism and insist not to give it up, despite all propaganda of Zionism, despite all tactics of Zionism, despite everything what's going on. And again, let's just come back to what is, today in our days now. All of this would be forbidden. All of this will be in total contrast to Judaism, no question. Even if this will be in total peace, not harming an animal, not harming anyone. Everybody is going to be happy. The entire world will support it. It'll still be in total contrast of basics of Judaism, and Jewish people will in no way accept it. But unfortunately, when this happens in Palestine, by adding so many crimes, especially what we are witnessing in the last couple of months, in like 6 months, basically, we are witnessing this genocide, this mass murder, with all excuses. There is nothing there's nothing there to justify what is going on, this genocide in Gaza. And it's not only in Gaza now, it's already going on for over 16 years in Gaza. As you nicely introduced me before, we visited Gaza in 2009. This was the beginning of the siege, and it was terrible at that time already. We still have the images of Gaza in front of our eyes. It is terrible, and it's way worse now. There's no way to justify this. But it's not only the siege in Gaza. It's an occupation going on for decades, which is, as I said before, it's not only a violation of international law. This is a true violation of Judaism. In no way can this represent the Jewish religion or the Jewish people. It's painful when all of this is being done supposedly in our name. And therefore, we come out in public and we say, no, this is not Judaism. This is not our people. This is not our religion. We are here for justice. We are here to speak up when something is being done wrong, especially when it's being done in our name. And we are here to sanctify the name of the Almighty and saying, no, this is not the Jewish religion in no way. On the contrary, the Jewish religion teaches everything against this movement of Zionism.
I see. Well, that's an incredible, certainly for anyone who's not familiar with the issue at all, that's a great starting point. I really appreciate your patient explanation. Before we take our first little break in about 3 or 4 minutes, I just wanted to mention last night we were invited to attend a screening of a film called Israelism. Are you familiar with this film? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I just saw it a week ago.
Yeah. And, well, apart from the fact that the film was made before this current terrible crisis in Gaza and the West Bank, I should never forget to mention the West Bank, you can only imagine how much worse it must be. But what was really interesting was there was I forget the gentleman's name, who he's Jewish, and he went to, he was brought up to believe that Israel was the place to go and learn Hebrew. He went to the Hebrew school, and eventually he ended up going to Israel and joining the IDF. And then he woke up to see what was really happening. And he even said, like, this is not what we were told. Like, if you read the Torah properly, it doesn't say in there to go back and recreate a homeland. It says our duty is to go out in the world, the diaspora.
Right. Yeah, it's a right point. And just to explain that a little bit more, what the Jewish people are waiting for, are yearning for, this is also, unfortunately misrepresented by the Zionist movement. The Zionists are trying to say, people are in exile, and then we all are yearning to go back, and this is what we are doing. We are going back to the Holy Land. And again, this is Zionist propaganda, because there is a true concept that Jewish people yearn to come back to the Holy Land. But the question is when, and the question is how. That's even more important. It's not something about a Zionist movement of oppressing another people. We, as I explained before, and I'll elaborate a little bit more, Jewish people are forbidden to end exile by any physical means. What we are waiting for is a spiritual future, which is going to happen by God only. Nothing about human power. This is what ultimate redemption for the Jewish people means. We are waiting that God should redeem humanity, basically. And whatever God will do, and in whichever way he will do it, everyone will accept. It's not something that I'm going to force you, or you are going to force upon me. This is something that we wait for Almighty God to do whatever is fit in his eyes. This is what Judaism is. This is what Judaism teaches. Now, when Zionism comes with this physical return to the Holy Land and presenting this as a religious concept, is again misrepresenting very basic and sensitive issues of Judaism. And this is ridiculous, and this is really terrible. Because what they are doing is they are politicizing spirituality. They are nationalizing a religion. And this is a true destruction to the very essence of the religion. And this happens all the time in all different kinds of ways. And people, Jewish people, need to wake up and realize to drop this anti-Jewish movement. And non-Jewish people have to wake up and realize that this is not Judaism. This does not represent Judaism, regardless which names people give to it. It is in no way a representation of the Jewish religion or of the Jewish people.
Before we took the break, I promised the audience that we would listen to this music that you had sent to us. Would you like to recite the words, or would you want me to do this?
It's up to you. I can tell you this. It's in traditional Hebrew, but I'll give it to you in English. In English, it's okay. In Hebrew, it is like this: Hashami malkaini v'lo yuni avudan toirusani agdoishu chikosaini v'lo henani namunam eveshilten koifrem einani makirim evechikosaim einani mischashva v'derech hatoiru nailaich v'aishiv amayim v'derech hatoiru nailaich lekadash shem shemayim. And in English, as follows: the Almighty is our King, and to him we are subservient. Our holy Torah is our law, and to it we are faithful. In the regime of the heretics we do not recognize, with its laws we do not reckon. In the path of the Torah we stride, in fire and in water. In the path of the Torah we stride to sanctify the name of the Almighty. Thank you.
Let's say the track.
Once before you play it, let me just tell you the history of this song.
Sure. Yes, thank you.
This was written by Rabbi Amram Blau. He was the leader of Neturei Karta, our organization, our movement. He was a very strong anti-Zionist leader at the beginning of Zionism. Passed away in the 1970s. He lived in Jerusalem and was an outspoken opponent to the movement of Zionism, to the state of Israel. And he was always encouraging not only Jews oppose the movement of Zionism, but come out in public and publicize this opposition to the world in order the world should see the true face of Judaism. He was very active. He was harassed, tortured by the Israeli government all the years. He was spending time in prison so many times. And this song he wrote while he was in Israeli prison. And what he said once to one of the great religious Jewish leaders in Jerusalem at the time, he said that when he is in prison, he feels much more comfortable. Why? Because when he's out in the free, he has so much obligation to oppose Zionism, and he's not sure whether he completes his duty to God to oppose them enough. When he's on the bars, he has no choice, and there's nothing he can do. So he's definitely righteous with God.
Okay. I can understand that completely. I've never been in prison, but I can understand the sentiment entirely. All right, here we go. Well, that's the end.
Now, let me just clarify though that last sentence, the very strong one, was Lekadosh Shem Shemaim, to sanctify God's name.
Okay.
That's how the song ends.
It's great because it's so uplifting and joyous sounding, but it's such a serious message. It's a good technique. Yeah, that works. For those who may be just joining me, I'm on the Zoom call here with Rabbi Dovid Feldman, and I suppose I have so many questions, really. But one question, I suppose, because for anyone, nobody can see this right now, but I'm looking at a gentleman who's wearing traditional Orthodox garb, but you're also wearing a kufiya and a Palestinian flag, and it's almost like a walking contradiction for most people. But as I understand more and more from what you're saying, it's not a contradiction at all. It's only because of the propaganda that it's ingrained in our minds. And that's something that the Israelism film really, really, really displayed, was how heavily brainwashed people can be by this kind of thing.
Let me say, it's not only that this is not a contradiction. It's on the contrary. For a Jewish person to be Zionist is the greatest contradiction. For a Jewish person to raise an Israeli flag is a true contradiction in its essence. If any religious person would hold a sign, "I'm a heretic," is a contradiction, isn't it? If any religious person will proclaim that he promotes violence and crimes, this is a contradiction of him being religious in any way possible. Being Palestinian, we have so many people, I have so many close friends who are Jewish by religion and are Palestinians according to their nationality. As I'm an American Jew, as there can be an Iraqi Jew, and there are so many Palestinian Jews. Those people, many of those people, lived in Palestine for generations. I have a very close friend in my town where I live, basically more than one, who are 8 generations Palestinians. Their grandparents lived in Palestine way before 1948, way before the Zionist movement, and they have all beautiful stories about Palestine. They have so many beautiful stories how they were treated in Palestine, how beautifully and nicely. They would love to go back to that the old history of Palestine, and they are so upset to what was done to their people, the Jewish people, and to the Palestinian neighbors, how everything was destroyed, and it happens to be so many people left. So many Palestinian Jews left Palestine because they no longer can take this evil, unjust approach to their neighbors, and they just don't want to have this being done in their name. This is very sad. It's very destructive. It's so dangerous, not only to the Palestinian people. You know, as we see today, you know, this genocide going on in Gaza now is so wrong when it's being done to the Palestinian people. But in the same time, people don't realize how wrong this is to the Jewish people, how dangerous this is to the Jewish people. Unfortunately, people see what's going on, whether they are Palestinian people, those people who are affected from this occupation, or any other people. They think that all Jews support all of this, and at the end of the day, all Jewish people become accountable to all crimes being committed by some on our account.
Well, I think it was you in one of your interviews that I watched where you said or expressed or the opinion, and it was actually expressed last night at the screening of Israelism, because much of the audience were Jewish Americans, and someone spoke up and said the same thing. I think it was you said that what's happening is making the world unsafe for Jewish people because, you know, at the same time, there's not a distinction in the public's mind between Zionism, Israel, and being a Jewish person, wherever you be in China and be Jewish. You can be in Russia and be Jewish. You can be in Israel, America, Puerto Rico. It doesn't matter, But it doesn't, So they express that great concern, and that's the sort of the diabolical, sort of almost self-fulfilling prophecy of what's the Zionists are doing. It's like make everybody afraid. You have to be in Israel, and I think it was also used said, why would I want to live in a country like Israel? Everybody has guns. It's like living in a fortress. It's not very. It's like I feel at least comfortable.
I always say not only that Israel is not the savior for the Jewish people, it is the greatest danger in our day and age for the Jewish people. Yes, there is anti-Semitism as a true concept, which is very old. But unfortunately, so much hatred is being directed to Jewish people today just because of what is being done in the name of all Jews. And I was interviewed at a demonstration a couple of weeks ago. It was a demonstration about the genocide in Gaza. And then that American reporter approaches me and asks me what I have to say to the Jewish students on college campuses in the United States that claim that they're facing hatred and they feel in danger on college campuses. And what I said is, I don't see any threat to Jewish people just because they are Jewish. If the individual Jewish person insists to raise an Israeli flag and insists to publicly say, yes, I'm the criminal and I'm the enemy, unfortunately, people will have some guilt feeling about that individual. Not that I'm so happy that that's so, but unfortunately, this is the consequence that every right-minded person should expect. And again, I'm not happy about it, but on the contrary, I'm so sad. But if you disassociate, if you do associate with Israel, then, that's the choice of the individual. But then you have to be realistic and be ready to face the consequence. Other Jewish people like myself disassociate from the movement of Zionism. I refuse to raise an Israeli flag, and I publicly oppose all what's being done. And guess what? Everybody loves me. Nobody hates me. I can visit Gaza. I can join a pro-Palestinian demonstration. No one ever will say to me a bad word. And if some people will misunderstand who I am, then it'll take a minute or two to explain. But that's all that it needs.
Well, you're very good.
Nobody hates.
You're very good. I've watched you. You always keep your level head and speak very calmly and organized, and it's very effective what you're doing. I must congratulate you for that. But
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you though. I mean, do you get like how to, for example, do you ever get any negative feelings from your own?
Well,
from other, like a typical, like a regular person, just New York Jewish person who has been brought up over their families, Holocaust survivors. They look at Israel as a safe place, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing? Why are you a traitor or something?
Right. Let me try to divide this into segments. The non-Jewish community, I almost never have an issue. Everybody will understand this very, very quickly. Even people that are unfamiliar, it doesn't take a lot for a person to understand what's going on and to understand, the difference between Judaism and Zionism. It's very easy to explain. Yes, those people who are brought up pro-Zionist, it's embarrassing to say and to see how closed-minded people can be in our day and age. We should expect people to be way more open-minded. And people are so closed-minded and so brainwashed. It's unbelievable. And that's why I have to say, on a side note, I always say that so many people I consider innocent because they know nothing better. They, if you are Jewish, then you have to support Israel. Otherwise, as you say, the traitor of the Jewish people. And unfortunately, many of those people don't even have the ability of overcoming this propaganda. We are trying our best, and we are very successful, and we are happy to open the minds of many people. But there is still so many people who would not only not be able to understand it, but they'll be so upset. That said, we have so much support within the Jewish communities. You can imagine that we would never be able to do what we are doing unless we have this massive support from so many people. And it happens to be those people who have difficulties to raise their voice in public, but they will do everything they can to support. And I'll tell you this little story. I once met a gentleman. He was one of the, you might even know the name, I'm not going to mention it, in Manhattan, in New York City, one of the huge Jewish companies. And he once came over to me and he said, I'll do everything I can to support you, but there's no way I can come out in public, join you. If I join you, they take a picture of me, I close down the business in the same day. So many people are in the same situation. But so many people are so upset with this Zionist misrepresentation of Judaism, and they do everything they can to support an alternative.
Well, it's interesting. I have a friend, a very good musician actually, who lives in Israel, and we've known each other and worked together on various occasions, and I respect him very much. But we were communicating, and I said, I just happened to mention in one of our emails back and forth, I said, there's a lot of young people in America and around the world that are really not comfortable with what's happening right now and do not support this. And he said, no, that's not really true. That's not really true. I think he might have meant most young people in Israel, not most people in the rest of the world. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to Israel. I don't know. I shouldn't speak out of place, but I had to contradict him on that idea because I see so many young people, and so many of the young people that I interact with are Jewish Americans, young Jewish Americans. And actually in the Israelism film, what's his name? The guy, the head of AIPAC, he says, Abe Foxman. He says, well, we've lost the young people. I think that's the opposite. They're discovering the truth.
And it's even in Israel, there's that movement, break the silence, from ex-Israeli soldiers. People are waking up, but there's a limit how long evil can succeed. There's a limit how much injustice people will tolerate. And there's a limit how much one can violate the word of Almighty God. God gives a free choice for the individual to choose life or death, choose righteousness or wickedness, but there is a limit. There's a limit, and God forbid nothing should happen. But we have reached we have reached a level which is, unfortunately, this cannot succeed anymore, because this is over all limits.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's still shocking, though, how few of our own politicians in this country and in other countries, I'm Canadian by birth, will not use the genocide word when they speak publicly. In fact, we only have two members of Congress, I think Rashida Tlaib, who's actually Palestinian, and then AOC just finally said something after she was confronted by some young people outside of a movie theater in Manhattan. And finally she came out. And people will argue, well, she's going to lose her seat in 5 minutes now because of that. But hey, at least in history, she's going to be looked upon as on the right side.
But listen, this intimidation of forcing one's opinion, this is not right. This is not logic. If this is the way how you control righteousness and evil, by force and by intimidation and by this should be unacceptable.
I agree. I mean, it didn't work for the Nazis, and it's not going to work in this occasion either,
Yeah.
I think. Well, we're almost out of time, Dovid, and I would. It's so fascinating, and I could sit and talk to you for hours, and I would love to be able to continue this discussion. But before I let you go, I'd like you to maybe finalize with just a few words that perhaps we didn't discuss, or you would like to say, just to put a point to it.
In short, to wrap everything up in short is as follows. The movement of Zionism does not represent Judaism. On the contrary, it is the total contrast of Judaism, even before any crimes being committed to anyone. When this happens in Palestine, it is not only a crime in international law, these are true crimes in Judaism. There is no way that the movement of Zionism represents Judaism as a religion, and in no way does the state of Israel and its actions represent the Jewish people. People need to understand that whatever is taking place in Palestine, these crimes committed needs to stop. And this needs to stop not only for the sake of the suffering Palestinian people who deserve freedom, who deserve justice, but for the sake of the Jewish people who are against their will dragged into this conflict and should not be responsible for the actions of the state of Israel. Human beings, well, Jewish people certainly have the obligation of speaking up because sadly, all of this is being done supposedly in our name. But you don't have to be Palestinian suffering people to condemn all what is taking place. You don't have to be Jewish and things should be done in your name to speak up and to say, no, not in our name. You just have to be human to do everything you can while we are witnessing. Today, regardless in which part of the world you live, you are a witness to what is taking place. You are seeing what's going on, even if you only see a part of the news, even if you are not exposed to real facts, what is taking place, you still know that something wrong is going on. And you should do everything you can to stop this, at least raise a voice, join a demonstration, do something, and never be intimidated. That speaking up against Israel is anti-Semitic in any way. I can only suggest that people should be, it's embarrassing to say this, but unfortunately, because of this massive propaganda, we have to clarify that we have nothing against the Jewish people. We never had. Crimes that are being done, regardless who the people perpetrating the crimes are, this has to stop. If a person crosses a red light and causes a danger, that person has to be stopped, regardless if he is religious or not, regardless whether he is Jewish or any other faith. A crime has to be stopped, and we should never be intimidated. Yes, we should have our minds set rightly and correctly. We shouldn't fall into this Zionist propaganda, and this is a whole conversation in itself. Don't we fall into Zionist propaganda to believe that Judaism and Zionism is one and the same? Because what the Zionist propaganda wants to do is to confuse the two in order to make you anti-Semitic if you oppose Zionism. And we should never allow this. We should separate the two and condemn whatever is wrong while we still respect Jewish people and the Jewish religion. We have to be very clear about this, because otherwise we fall into the trap and we not only allow crimes to be committed to the Palestinian people, we allow the consequences of Zionism to blame all Jews to what is taking place. And this, all of this is unfair, is unjust, is not in favor of anyone. And I have to end with this. The state of Israel, or the movement of Zionism, is not here for the favor, safety, or security of the Jewish people. The Jewish people can be protected under Palestinians or under any other Muslim people. It is the political nationalism of Zionism which is being promoted And everything is being done to preserve this movement, which happens to be an anti-Jewish movement, happens to be a criminal movement, and happens to have so much wrongdoings to it. But it's nothing about the people, it's about a national movement. And we have to remember that.
Thank you so much. It's very eloquently put, and I'm so glad to hear this. Thank you so much for your time, Rabbi Feldman, and shalom, peace be with you.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity, and I'm so glad to speak to your audience. And people deserve to know better than mainstream media presents to them.
Thank you. Maybe I'll see you out at a demonstration somewhere.
Sure.
I'll look for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
nice
you.
Meeting you.
Be well. Thanks so much for your time. Good night.
Sure.
Welcome to Hour 2. You're listening to Radio Kingston, WKNY, 1490 AM, 107.9 FM. And on the internet's always, at any time, day or night, this program and all the other wonderful programs that we work so hard to bring you is available on radiokingston.org. So, for the second hour, Tahdg Hickey. Tahdg Hickey's biting political satire has amassed 100 million views, a global social media following, as well as a sprinkling of death threats. Tahdg has written, directed and starred in much TV work for the Ireland's national broadcaster RTE, including the sitcom The School. He's toured Ireland and Britain extensively with his critically acclaimed theatre and stand-up comedy shows. Tahdg's first book, a memoir about his alcoholism, a portrait of the piss artist as a young man, is out now and is ruining many a young person's drinking with the help of God. Tahdg is everywhere on social media, including Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find all those links, including the link to his Patreon or on his website, Tahdg Hickey, which is spelled T-A-D-H-G, that's Tahdg, Hickey, Hickey.com. And without wasting too much more time, this is my interview earlier this week, just a few days back, to be sure, with Tahdg Hickey from Cork, Ireland, where he lives. How's the weather in Cork? It's always a good start to a conversation, right? How's the weather?
It's actually pretty good, yeah. We have our clocks going back or forward, probably forward tonight. And you can feel like, it's a cliche, but there's a stretch in the evening for the last little while. It feels like spring, early summer is kind of here. So it's actually pretty good. It's weird because we've been marching, obviously, for Palestine for the last 25 weeks, and you can track the progression of the weather through the marching, So it's been all weather, all seasons. Well, Ireland's a bit like that anyway. We don't really have, at this point, it's just kind of winter and summer and autumn at the same time, all the time.
Right.
But it's currently, right now, it's good, Malcolm. So it's good. It's good today.
Thanks for joining us on the program. I'm really quite excited. I came across your work almost. Well, now I know why they're trying to ban TikTok, because it's probably because of you, my friend. But it was, your videos just sort of started appearing in my TikTok feed, and I just, it was quite a breath of fresh air to hear someone using humor and satire in a sort of what I would call sort of the traditional way, following in the footsteps of people like Lenny Bruce and George Carlin, sort of using humor to get across a pretty serious message. I mean, let's not forget what we're actually focusing on here is actual genocide. So, but could you talk just a little bit about how you sort of incorporate and what led you to the idea of incorporating humor to get your point across?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'd always been interested in that type of comedy. I had for a while, so I worked with the national broadcaster here and had done some surreal comedy that wasn't all that political. And then I started doing my own thing probably around the start of COVID, when it felt like the world was imploding. So it seemed like a good time to just express yourself exactly how you would if kind of no one was watching. And then bizarrely, that type of material took off. So I would have been lampooning largely kind of the British hierarchy, the British state, British imperialism, the politicians in my own country wasn't particularly fond of. So it was domestic and extending to Britain, I suppose, and looking at colonialism generally, for sure. But in around that period, so that would have been a few, maybe about 2020, 2021. There was another so-called war on Gaza, and I had always been interested in Palestine because coming from an Irish background, an Irish Republican background specifically, Palestine is something that we just always naturally kind of identified with.
Sure.
Um, but I think specifically in Palestine in the last few months, it seems like I felt a utility to what I'm doing that I almost felt compelled to kind of get involved. You know, the idea that we're all doing our thing and my thing is kind of jokes. So my way of offering solidarity and contributing to the movement is to do jokes, and the jokes will be in consultation with Palestinians to make sure, as you say, because it's obviously a very treacherous area. You don't want to be making light of something so serious. But every time I talk to a Palestinian, be it now or in the previous so-called war, they'd always say, get in there. Like satire, we need satire now more than ever. And I was actually talking to a Palestinian friend of mine that he was making the point that, you know, the way part of the Zionist propaganda is to make you feel like you would never understand the depth of this situation in the Middle East. Like I even saw a headline recently about the Jonathan Glazer situation, which says, you know, just because you made a good movie doesn't mean you understand the Middle East, like implying that you need a political science qualification in order to talk about it. The beauty of satire, I think, is that it does the exact opposite of that. It kind of makes the so-called nuanced situation readily understandable, because Israel and Palestine on one level is basically just a lad calling to another lad's house saying, you have to get out. I live here now because it says so in this made up book of ancient stories. So I feel like if it's something that I'm good at, then I need to be fearless about losing work or getting into trouble, because if it's something I'm good at and I feel passionate about it, it's an obvious synthesis to make between the two things then.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen that, the one, your clip with the two, you know, you usually, for people in the audience who may not have seen Tadhg's work, you play all the parts yourself for the most part, and it's very well done. And so you'll play the antagonist and the progenitor at the same time, you know, back and forth. And the one you're referring to is someone sort of saying yes, but, you know, and then your response is, well, you know, if it was just my house. And you just sort of showed up at the door and said, look, you need to leave because I lived here 50 years ago, like bugger off, mate. I want to backtrack just a tiny bit, though, because, you know, Ireland, you know, particularly with people like Claire Daly and Mick Wallace and whatnot, the support for the Palestinians is very strong in Ireland. I'd like you to go back a little bit to your Republican roots and how that sort of connects with the Palestinian cause.
Many of my friends are in the north of Ireland, and their relationship and understanding of British imperialism is not abstract. It's not something that they read in a book. It's alive and it's present in their life all the time. I mean, friends of mine have recently been denied the chance of getting justice because of shenanigans that the British government are pulling to obfuscate the crimes that they've committed in the north. So it's all very immediate for them. So when you talk to people like that, and I'm friends with people who are in their 60s and 70s, they've literally lived through the conflict. Palestine is literally in the Falls Road. Palestine is all over the walls, you know, an understanding of, and it's not just Palestine, it's Cuba, it's anywhere where people are oppressed. I think the most beautiful thing about Irish resistance and Irish republicanism, which for me is not tethered to any party or individual, it's a spiritual thing, actually. And the Irish, I think, have always gotten that sense of solidarity with oppressed people around the world. There's something about Palestine, all right, though, that is kind of, the similarities are almost kind of unnerving. And I think it's best summed up in the dehumanization. So the way in which Palestinians are dehumanized in order for the regime to commit the atrocities they do against them, that rings a horrid bell for Irish people, because you know, the British did the exact same thing to us. The idea of, you know, in the Washington Post, I think there was a cartoon depicting a Palestinian as subhuman or bloodthirsty or, you know, base and not really like on the same level as us. And of course, as you know, the British Punch magazine used to depict Irish people as simian ape-like and a bit of a burden on the really intelligent upper class Englishmen. And it was like, what are we going to do with this ape-like kind of subhuman Irish person? And of course, then the idea of resistance, you know, for the Palestinians to have the temerity to resist their occupation and oppression, they're described as terrorists. And of course, that's exactly the Irish experience as well, you know. Like Christopher Hedges, who I've heard you speak about, I think he really describes this wonderfully, that context is so important. So if you take away the historical context and somebody tells you this group of people are terrorists, then you'll believe it. So it is all about information. So part of the thing that I'm trying to do, and the people around me that I respect are trying to do, is to just fill in those gaps of knowledge. You know, that if people understand the context of what Palestine has gone through and is going through, they won't see them as terrorists. You know, and I've heard you say before, this so-called conflict didn't start on October 7th. Of course it didn't. It'd be like saying, pick whatever IRA bomb you want and pick the recent conflict in the north or pick the War of Independence. And if you were to say, well, that particular IRA attack started the war against Britain, we'd all know that that's a laughable thing to say, like, because you'd have to go back literally 800 years to get a sense of the start of the conflict. So I think Chris Hedges is bang on when he says context is everything.
Yes. I suppose a parallel, for example, in this country would be the plight of the over 500-year plight of the indigenous people on this continent.
Exactly.
You know, like if you were to say, well, you know, the reason we killed off the rest of the Lakota Sioux was because of Wounded Knee, without putting Wounded Knee,
exactly,
or sorry, not Wounded Knee, the Battle of Little Bighorn, pardon me, you know, where General Custer and his guys were, you know, you'd think, well, yeah, sure, but the Battle of the Little Bighorn was a result of years and years and years of atrocities against the indigenous people on this continent. And so, yeah, you know, and I think any American can understand that very clearly.
And it's trying to challenge, because I've literally just come back from a march in Cork, and it's trying to challenge the indifference. I think it's something that I'm almost becoming obsessed with, because, you know, if, as you say, if you're looking at it on your phone, or if you happen to watch Al Jazeera or any alternative news service at any stage of the day at all, you will see live streamed the genocide and annihilation of a people, or them being starved to death, or all of the above. Like, you can see it with your own eyes. And for that not to, I mean, some people would say radicalize, I would say rationalize people into getting up off their arse and doing something about it. I'm not sure, as you said, I just didn't think that we could possibly get to this level without a mass movement. You're getting wonderful numbers on the streets, and I'm sure it's the same in the US, but you're not getting people in, like, we're still passing by McDonald's and there's people in there. You still have people like treating the march as a kind of an oddity, standing on the side of the road, filming it on their phones, as if to say, what are these people kind of doing on a Saturday afternoon? You're still treated a little bit like an oddity. How do you get through to people? I just really don't get it. One thing for sure that doesn't work, actually, and I don't know why I'm kind of rambling about this now, but like, in Ireland we have a phrase called giving out. You know, like, giving out to someone doesn't work. Like, in other words, kind of, you know, treating them like as if they're kids and you're the teacher, you know. So like, I don't know about you, but I never did anything when someone gave out to me. You'd have to just encourage me in. And I just think it's never too late for people to, it's something I did a video on recently, to jump on the bandwagon, you know, because people are talking to me privately, and I heard Roger Waters saying the same thing, where there's lots of people who are privately passionate about Palestine, and they're scared to either jump on the bandwagon or the effect that it's going to have on their career. But it feels like this is a moment in history, that we're living through a moment in history right now. It's not going away. The world is going to be changed forever afterwards. And like, you're going to have to jump on this bandwagon at some stage, or you're going to be complicit with mass murder. Like, it's binary, I think. Well, I would urge people who have a profile on social media, first of all, because so much of, I mean, there's an online war, you know what I mean? There's an information war online that is so crucial. Like, and whatever you think of social media, and I only started posting videos on Instagram probably about 2 or 3 months before this broke out, I used to always just do stuff on Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter. And like, I've got problems with social media. We all do. And I'm not mad about the fact that I'm probably half addicted to it. And I don't want my children to become addicted to it. And to use Roger Waters' term, it is the man as well. Like, the man is kind of reaching you through the phone, of course. I'm aware of that. But for better or worse, there's an online war going on right now with disinformation. And if you've got a massive following, again, I would just urge people to just be aware that this isn't going away. I understand the impulse that we all have, which is, I want to do my stuff. I want to promote my weekend away. I want to promote my gig. I want to keep my paid partnerships. I understand that we've all got families. And I mean, personally, I've been sidelined from a lot of opportunities in this part of the world. And, I kind of need the social media thing in order to kind of, make some money, be it on Patreon or whatnot, or the very odd kind of endorsement that I used to get back in the day. So I understand if you've already been sidelined, for instance, maybe because of your politics, and then if you put yourself out there on social media on a very contentious issue like this, which obviously it is, it's not that contentious in Ireland, but I get fully that it is a hugely contentious issue in, say, the US or Germany or even Britain.
Oh, especially, living in and around New York City, which is,
yes.
I think Brooklyn has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel in Brooklyn, New York. And interestingly enough, my guest on the first hour of tomorrow's show is a person by the name of Rabbi Dovid Feldman, who's very outspoken. He's an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, and he's one of those. You've probably seen him, at pro-Palestinian rallies. There'll be, he's there with Palestinian flag and a keffiyeh, and he's got. Anyway, I forget what I was kind of saying, but yeah, it's a contentious issue, is what I'm really agreeing with you. Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
And so those big pages, like what? I mean, let's just get philosophical for a second. I mean, what is the purpose of your massive page? It can't just be you doing your stuff. Like, I mean, I don't think people are really built that way. Like, everyone's got a soul. Everyone's got the opportunity with a massive audience. Like, I'm thinking of, there's comedians both in Ireland and around the world, and I like a lot of them, and they're just saying nothing at the moment. And it's driving me crazy, because some of these people have been posting, about easy activism for years. They're pro-trans, but they don't even know what that means. It's low-risk activism.
Right.
They're for women's rights, but I've known that a lot of them kind of mistreat women. But in terms of the optics, they're pro-women, or whatever that means. They're pro-equal rights. They'll sign their names to campaigns that are of no risk to them whatsoever. And the first time something comes along that presents some risk to their paid partnerships, they're like completely silent, or they play the card of a comedian friend of mine, Matt Lee, describes this beautifully. It's like, well, I'm a comedian. What I know, I shouldn't be saying anything about serious stuff because I'm just a crazy comedian. And as you said, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. I mean, I think the comparison to 1940s in Germany, I think is, it's a provocative one, but it's bang on. It's a very good comparison, because most Germans in that scenario, and I'm open to correction here, the complicity was mostly through doing nothing.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
complicity was looking the other way. It wasn't like the Nazi guards. It was people going, I'm not too happy about what's going on over there. I know that it's crazy stuff, but it's to a minority group. Would it really be all that bad if we get rid of them? I'm just going to go about my business. And that's kind of what's going on today on another level. And it's, as you said, you know what? Like, I listened to the Roger Waters interview, and I thought, this man he's still on the marches. He's still putting himself out there. Like, he's 80, like I'm 40. And I'm like, I would gladly now, and this is the only way I'll ever compare myself to Roger Waters, by the way, I would gladly dedicate the rest of whatever time I have now to try and agitate for change in this area and other areas in whatever art I do. And I don't for a moment think, aren't I so great for doing that? Or I'm not looking for praise. It's basic human compassion and solidarity with people who are suffering. That's what it is. And I think that's what we need to embolden other people to do. That you might get some backtrack, you might lose the odd paid partnership, but you're going to save your own soul.
Well spoken, my friend. Spoken like a true Irishman. Yeah, it was funny, because at one point during the very long interview with Roger, he said, I've just turned 80 years old. I should be resting on my laurels and playing golf and stuff. But
I loved it. I listened to it. I loved it.
And then he said, I wish I had another 20 years because I'm not done yet, and I love that,
And it's beautiful what he said, what his mother said to him. It's worth repeating. It's just so beautiful. It's like, if you want to stand up for something, if it's the right thing to do, just do it. Just do it. It's as simple as that, And if enough people had that attitude, I'm hearing so many people at the moment going, well, what real difference is it going to make to me? I even heard like a friend of a friend saying, there's no point in me boycotting Coca-Cola, because what could one individual do by boycotting Coca-Cola?
Well, that'd be like someone saying to Coca-Cola, don't worry about selling one bottle of Coke because it doesn't matter. I mean, exactly. They all add up, one bottle for you and one bottle for you, and we've just sold 10,000. We are going to play a track. Actually, I'd like to play Exit Pursued by a Bear Hug, your own bit of music. So when we come back... This
is my band's American debut. Whoa.
All right. This is The Long Way Around. I'm your host, Malcolm Byrne, on WKNY Radio Kingston. And my special guest tonight is comedian, musician, and all-around humanitarian, Tahdg Hickey. Tahdg Hickey. Tahdg, before we took that break, I thought I'd get you to intro this track of your own music. So...
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Yeah, this is a last-minute addition. I had a few suggestions, and then listening to Roger Waters, I felt emboldened. I said, you know what, I'm going to throw my own band in there. So, we did a couple of albums a few years ago. We're kind of on a hiatus for probably about 10 years at this point.
It's a long hiatus.
We recorded two because we're all kind of pseudo-intellectuals, like Wikipedia-fueled pseudo-intellectuals, and we have no leader. We tend to do like an album kind of once every 7 or 8 years. But yeah, that's a track. There's a track of ours called Hug, which people used to like. And it's from the perspective of a guy who's fallen in love with a pole dancer.
Fair enough. I knew a man like that. It happened. It actually happened.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, he fell in love with a pole dancer up in the Alps in Switzerland.
Oh, wow.
we said,
track.
We said, mate, you're married for one thing. And second of all, I know it's like 10 guys and one woman stuck in the Alps, but when you get back to Zurich, you'll realize. All right. So this is Pursued by a Bear Hug.
come to consumer. To me she is the consumer, not the consumed. The enigma to be refined, to be imaged, wrapped in purine, through the blinking eye flicker to capture.
Yeah. What I wanted to, I watched an interview. Oh, as a matter of fact, yeah, it was your most recent interview with our mutual friend George Galloway. In the interview, you mentioned something when the special military operation, whatever you want to call it, in Ukraine occurred 2.5 years ago now. Everybody had an emoji, a yellow and blue flag.
Yeah.
And, yard signs literally right outside on my street, we stand with the Ukraine and a sunflower and all that. What do you think the difference is? Because why would people be so rampantly supportive of that, yet sort of turning a blind eye to what's going on now? Where do you think?
Well, it's back to the low risk thing again, I think, isn't it? Like, it's very easy to get involved in something where the traditional bogeyman is cast as the bogeyman, and that's Russia. Russia is always the bogeyman. And the online thing is so reductive that if you have the temerity to speak about some of John Mearsheimer's work or others who've highlighted the role that NATO expansion has played in that war, then you're depicted, I think, as he is, as a Putin puppet. But the issue there is, I would probably follow the logic that it's not an imperialist war in the traditional sense, that I don't believe from what I've read personally that Putin was trying to get the good old USSR back up and running. The real issue in all that narrative, whether you feel like Russia is an imperialist or not in the current context, is that we've always traditionally, and I say we, I think in the West, have had Russia as the baddie. Again, to go back to the cartoons, I mean, like, I grew up with cartoon depictions of Russia as an octopus, like post World War II, and I'm not sure exactly what would have been the narrative before then, but Russia's the baddie, and that's a real safe place to be. So if Russia's doing some bad in the West, you can publicly go, oh, look, Russia's at it again. And all the information that we got from the journalists and the politicians, round-the-clock information, was that this is a horrendous thing that's going on. They have invaded a sovereign country. It's typical Russia. You can't trust them. I mean, it's completely xenophobic. Like, there's a real xenophobic thing with even Russian people, I think, are thrown into the mix with it as well. It's like, let's ban them from every competition that we can think of, public support. And I'm not talking about ordinary people. I mean, even in Ireland, the business community rallied round Ukrainians at the outbreak of the war. Academic institutions here were making powerful speeches and launching scholarships for Ukrainian students. Because why? Because, again, it's low-risk activism. Well, Russia's a baddie. You're not going to get any pushback.
Well, do you think there's an element of racism involved also? Because, they're white people and they look like us, whereas the Palestinians are Middle Eastern looking, and you can sort of lump them into this sort of different category, or definitely.
And it's actually a video I'm putting out next week, which is on a kind of an honest naysayer. So the honest naysayer has perspective on why he's not getting involved in the marches. And one of the things he says is, it's mad. But the darker the skin color, the less I tend to care about people. He's just honest about it. He's kind of going, it's like with the Ukrainian situation, I was looking at them going, that looks a little bit like me and my girlfriend, that me and my girlfriend could be struggling here. But the darker you get, the more you kind of go, well, look, it's black and brown people, they're always up to something. It's that kind of honest perspective on the racist aspect of it. But that's not the whole story, I don't think. The other thing about Palestine is that it doesn't have the same economic or political importance. So it's very easy in the West to kind of go, well, Israel is effectively an outpost of the West. It's settler colonialism for today, for the TikTok generation. That's what Israel is. That's our ally. I mean, Israel is effectively another state in the US, an unofficial state of the US. So, Israel's our buddy. Palestine, they've got no support really. I mean, their only support is from other states that we've banned. So we've banned Iran. Like Iran is kind of supporting them. So they're over there in the bowl corner, and that's the official narrative. And you don't need to look into it anymore. And there's no point in looking into it anymore anyway, because it's too complex. You'd never understand it. This is the propaganda. It's very familiar. So I feel like you're right insofar as, of course, racism plays a part in it. They don't look like us. And we're so used to seeing black and brown people suffer as well. In the global south, we're used to seeing those images. So there's nothing unusual about it. It's shocking when we see white kids suffer. But the racism is a big part of it. But the other part of it is, in terms of the money and the way the world works and the way the man, to use Roger Waters' term again, works, Palestine is low value. Israel is our buddy. We need to support him. So there's all that stuff going in the mix. But I think one brilliant thing, and I would like to give a shout out to the kids. I have a 20-year-old daughter, and her age and younger, they're seeing through this hypocrisy now.
Yeah,
and they're not
absolutely.
standing for it anymore. And I've never been more enthusiastic. I'm excited for the future because the kids aren't accepting. And I'm looking at videos online from young students in the US in particular who are challenging their politicians and their connection to the Israel lobby in a way I've never seen before. So the kids are okay.
Well, a friend of mine, he's actually running for Congress in the South Bronx. His name is Jose Vega, and this is his poster. And you can't see it's kind of backwards, but that's Jose in the picture there.
Nice.
And I call him. I've nicknamed him the interventionist. Someone said to me recently, they were like, "Well, I don't care what the problem is. It's no good showing all this kind of disrespect to our lawfully elected officials." And I was like, "These are the people you're supposed to yell at, not stop yelling at me."
I don't care how many genocides are going on. Do not disrespect that elderly man.
Don't be doing that now. You're gonna, show some bloody respect.
Show some basic respect for people who look like me.
Yeah. So, well, I suppose we should play another song, and I was going to play the what's his name, McDonald track, Joe McDonald.
Yeah, Joe McDonald. Oh my God, amazing. Yeah, I'd love if you did.
Yeah, so this track is called what's the name of the Wolf? Oh no, the
Ballad of Joe McDonald.
Right, the group is called the Wolf Tones. Yeah, sure. So this is are they? Well, clearly they're Irish.
Yeah, the Wolf Tones are a slightly controversial group in Ireland because they play anti-imperialist music, which can sometimes not offend British people, but middle-class Irish people who are a bit sensitive.
Yeah. I remember you saying that the people that are the most squeamish are actually your own folks there in southern. More, I would say more so in the south, right, of Ireland.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally.
Like up north, there's no issue.
No, we've become a bit comfortably numb in the south, to those kind of things. So we're on our way to becoming a kind of for a long time we're on our way to becoming a middle class country that's distancing itself from where it's been politically and historically. So sometimes the ruling class get very squeamish about any remembering at all of the colonial past and the connection with Britain. It's just like, it's in the past, just let it go. And actually the beautiful thing about this Palestinian solidarity is that it has reawakened it, but not in a negative way, in a kind of a reimagining and reloving of one's own country and one's own nation and language and culture and it's a beautiful thing. There's a real symbiotic thing happening between Palestine and Ireland right now that it's pure beautiful, like it really is.
It's been excellent talking to you, and before I let you go, I'd like to ask you if there's any last something I might have missed or that we didn't talk about that perhaps is on your mind that you wanted to mention.
I mean, the only thing I'd say is if people are looking up my stuff, I'm on all the usual platforms, and what I always say to people is, because I get messages. I was with Daniel Mate the other night, and he's done a brilliant video on people sending a message saying, I can't share your stuff and I can't add to your story. And he's like, I'm not tech support. Like, it's just leave me alone and try and figure it out in a nice way. He's obviously being playful. And like, we're all being censored at the moment. So every pro-Palestinian voice is being censored. I'm getting censored a lot less because I'm white. So a lot of my Palestinian friends are just getting their accounts smashed completely. I'm still up there. So if you can share my stuff, great. But if you can't, just share another pro-Palestinian account and prioritize Palestinians. Because to go back to something that we talked about earlier, all this money that the Israeli lobby are spending, and they're still losing the war. Like, they're still losing the information war.
Yes.
And you've got all these kids who are pro-Palestinian, and it's all on organic sharing of material that for me is just the truth. So that's the thing. Like, the oppressor will always struggle in the narrative battle because he's not on the side of the truth. He's not on the side of justice. He's not on the side of what really matters about being a human being. So if you are online, I'd urge you, if you've got a big following, first of all, to jump on that bandwagon. And if you're just sharing stuff, please keep sharing. Prioritize Palestinians, and we all have a part to play.
Well said, my friend, comrade. Well, thanks a million, and hope you have a good rest of your day there. And next time I'm in Cork, I'll look you up.
Please do. Oh my God, you'd be more than welcome. Go meet him all, Malcolm. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right, Tadhg. Take care of yourself. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye. That was an interview with comedian, online tube sensation and musician Tahdg Hickey. This is the Wolf Tones with Joe McDonnell.
Man got no chance and no opportunity to tell their story back in 1981. I'm going to ask each and every person here tonight for 5 minutes of silence, of complete silence, to listen to their story. Here's Tommy to sing of a young man from Belfast called Joe McDonnell.
Oh, my name is Joe McDonnell. From Belfast town I came. That city I will never see again. For in the town of Belfast I spent many happy days. I love that town in oh so many ways. For it's there I spent my childhood and found for me a wife. I then set out to make for her a life. But all my young ambitions met with bitterness and hate. I soon found myself inside a prison gate. And you dare to call me a terrorist while you put down your gun. When I think of all the deeds that you had done. You had plundered many nations, divided many lands. You had terrorized their peoples. You ruled with an iron hand, and you brought this reign of terror to my land. Through those many months' internment in the Maidstone and the maze, I thought about my land throughout those days. Why my country was divided, why I was now in jail, imprisoned without crime or without trial. And though I love my country, I am not a bitter man. I've seen cruelty and injustice at first hand. So then, one fateful morning, I shook bold freedom's hand. For right or wrong, I'd try to free my land. And you dare to call me a terrorist while you put down your gun. When I think of all the deeds that you had done. You had plundered many nations, divided many lands. You had terrorized their peoples. You ruled with an iron hand. And you brought this reign of terror to my land. Then one cold October's morning, trapped in a lion's den, I found myself in prison once again. I was committed to the H blocks for 14 years or more, and the blanket, the conditions, they were poor. That a hunger strike we did commence for the dignity of man, but it seemed to me that no one gave a damn. But now I am a saddened man. I've watched my comrades die. If only people cared or wondered why. And you dare to call me a terrorist while you look down your gun. When I think of all the deeds that you had done.
Well, it's so sad and always a heartbreaker for me to say it's the end of the show, but such is life. Things must change and move forward. And with that, I'm inviting you to stay tuned to Radio Kingston to listen to Nick Pankin coming up right after this with Freedom Highway. And if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, I'll see you next week. Be well. Thank you.